So good evening, everybody. I'm Zoe from Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching, and you are joining us on our hashtag Fire5 at Phoenix. So this is our first one in our second month. So we've got a new theme this month talking about the relationship that we have with ourselves and the relationships that we have with other people. So I am joined tonight by Dereen Sharp. Good evening, Dereen.
Good evening.
So thank you for coming in. So Dereen is an independent consultant with Arbonne, and Arbonne does sort of health and well-being, supplements, nutrition, healthcare, lots of kind of makeup and creams and things good for the inside and the outside of the body. Is that that's summed up terribly, but that's how I see it anyway. But I know, Dereen, you've been on your own journey, haven't you, in kind of improving your own sort of health and well-being. If I put you on the spot, do you want to tell us a little bit about that before you get to fire the questions at me?
Well, I mean, I've always had an interest in health and well-being, but personally, and again, this kind of fits in with tonight's theme, is that I personally went through some difficult times many years ago, and that kind of kicked off a well-being journey for me, mentally and physically, and just understanding what other people go through as well.
Yeah, I think your journey is a bit like mine, isn't it? Is that the physical journey almost prompted the mental and emotional journey and self-development, self-improvement?
Yeah, I would say so.
Which is a lot bigger, isn't it? It's a bigger chunk of the elephant to eat for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So you got 5 questions for me?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so topic tonight and for the rest of this month is the relationship with ourselves and other people. So I haven't seen Dereen's questions, so go ahead with the first one. I'm excited to see what you've got with.
What does having a relationship with yourself mean to you? How would you define that to someone who's just starting to explore a deeper meaning of what that really means to them and the importance of that? How would you explain that to somebody?
That's a good starting question. I think the thing that I notice the most when I have these conversations with people is that people quite often identify themselves through their relationships with other people. So, you know, people will describe themselves as a wife or a husband, as a mother or a father, as a boss, you know, that they'll define themselves by their work, or they'll define themselves by a particular role that they have. And I think quite often when you take that away and you say to people, okay, well, if you take that away, if you're not being a wife or a mother, who is Dereen? Who is Dereen when she's not in wife mode, or she's not in, you know, boss mode? You know, who is Dereen and what is Dereen about? And I think that's where a lot of people don't take much time to kind of sit and really think through. And I think, you know, when you look at, you know, a lot of the work that I do around helping people to identify what their values are, what their needs are, how they meet their own needs, not just through other people, but just if you took other people away, how do you work that out yourself? So I think the definition for that is just understanding who you are and what you're about, you know, really understanding what's important to you. You know, what are your ethics? What are your morals? What's your passion? What's your purpose in life? What is it you're working towards? You know, what is it that's important to you? What makes you who you are? And I think some people get caught up in defining themselves by roles, and some people define themselves by experiences. So I think it's just when we take all of that away and we look at who we are and our character and who we are and what we're about, I think that's spending some time really understanding that can make a real difference to people.
Yeah.
I think there is a danger that we spend a lot of time being somebody to somebody else, but we don't often kind of strip that back and work out who we are for us.
Yeah. I think we cling on to labels and identity, don't we? We cling on to you know, some people do, and I guess that makes us feel part of something, gives us that identity. But I do agree with you. I think it's important to take that away and really kind of delve into what, taking those labels away, I guess. Who are you?
And I think that's the challenge for me, is if you're creating an identity and you need somebody or something else to be a part of that identity, what happens if that goes? What happens if that changes? What happens if that dynamic changes? What then happens to your identity? So I think we need to be really clear on who we are and what we're about, so that we can then offer that up to other people, and other people can be a part of that and that authentic self, rather than going around shaping ourselves into being this person for this person, this person for this job, and this person for this role. I think when you really understand who you are and what's important to you, it's a lot easier to go and have those conversations with other people and attract and spend time and match that with people who see you and value you for who you are, rather than who you're trying to be for somebody else.
Yeah. Just as a side question to that first question, how would you explain to someone what would be the first steps for them to identify that within themselves? What steps can they take to kind of try and remove the labels and really dig deep?
Oh, that's another good question, actually. I think start with who you feel you are, and then look to see how many of those are attached to who you are to somebody else. So, what is that a role that you play or a part that you play for somebody else? So if you were to, just see, I'm picturing it like it's on a piece of paper, and that you have all of the people in your life on one sheet of paper. So all the people that are important to you, and then all of the things about you who are important, all of the things about yourself that are important on another sheet of paper. And you could probably marry them up, you could tie them up. But if you were to take that second piece of paper with the list of people attached to it, how much of that on that first piece of paper would still be really important? Would you still continue if you weren't giving that or receiving that from other people? A lot of the work that I do focuses on values and needs, because I think that's at the core. And a lot of work then that follows that is looking at the purpose. But I think the purpose comes after. I think the identity is very much around the values, the principles that we live by, and the needs, the things that we feel are important to us to have that fulfillment in life. And then once we know what those are, then we can find ways to build on that. But we've got to have that within us and not be reliant on other people. They can contribute to it, they can add to it, but they can't be solely responsible for it. We have to meet that ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something you could help somebody with identifying anyway, isn't it? That's part of the work you do, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't need to be present to do that. I can provide people with the tools to sit and reflect on that, and ways to do that. So it doesn't necessarily need me to be there. Some people find it helpful to sit and talk through, especially when you're looking at how you narrow it down to the ones that are most important. Sometimes it's helpful to have a conversation around that as to why some things are more important than others.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to have someone prompt you, I guess, with the right questions. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think that's where coaching comes into play, is that I'm not bought into what the answer. There's no judgment on what the answers are, but what I can do is help ask questions that get you to think about things differently, to work out what the answers are for you.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So, question 2. Do you think our relationships with other people have changed during lockdown? And if so, how do you think they have changed?
Oh. Do you have a particular, are you talking about more sort of the people who we live with and have been spending more time with, or?
Well, I think relationships in general, everything has had to change during lockdown. If you're living with someone, you're with them all the time. If you're not, you are very limited to how you interact with them. But I think for business as well, people having to change things to suit their business, how do you think that lockdown has changed that for us?
I know we've just been talking about values and needs, but I think that's one of the things that has come out or certainly been highlighted for people. So whether or not it's been a conscious thought process that people have gone through, I think what lockdown did was it created an immediate change that people didn't get a chance to really think about and to make decisions on. It was, literally, a day, 2 days, and everything was changed. And I think over the first couple of weeks, people noticed, or it became very apparent, things that had been stopped or taken away that were important to people, and how people had to adapt and amend things or find alternatives to try and meet the same needs in a different way. So even if you just look at, how people stayed active, you remember that it seems like ages ago now, doesn't it? But that first couple of weeks where we were only allowed that one walk a day, people who probably never went for a walk, lots of people were suddenly out walking because you couldn't go to the gym, you couldn't go swimming, there were lots of things that people would normally do to stay active that wasn't an option anymore.
So it was the only thing you were allowed to do.
Exactly. So you had to find another way to do it. So there was lots of adapting of, okay, I need to do this, I need to meet this need, how else can I do it? So I think, that's on a very kind of, Maslow's hierarchy, that's right down the fundamental, isn't it? That physiological need. You look at the need for toilet roll and the need for eggs and self-raising flour. Again, okay, I need something to do, I need to be creative, I need to be busy. Everybody started baking. This was not about suddenly having everybody suddenly felt a need for banana cake. It was more about, I can't do things that I would normally do, so actually baking is a great way to pass the time, or it's a great activity if you're homeschooling. So it wasn't that suddenly there was this desire, for a Great British Bake Off. It was more just something to do. So I think unconsciously all of us had to kind of reassess, right, what's important, how do we meet it? And I think consciously then, as time started to pass, we thought things through a little bit more. Okay, right, this is going on for a little while now. How do we look at it in a different way? So I think in the same way, that's where relationships kind of came into play, didn't they? Because we've had to make some quite difficult decisions. We've had our guidelines that some have been clearer than others, but we've had to work out, who are we, when lockdown happened, there were certain people who were like in one area who made the decision to move into a different area so they could be with people rather than be distant. There were people who, depended on, grandparents who were split from grandchildren. You split from your nieces, your nieces. So you think that, that challenged a lot of relationships of, okay, how do we spend time with people who are important to us? How do we adapt? If we can't see them physically, and especially when they're younger children, how do you keep that contact going? And again, with businesses, you've got a relationship with your clients. If you can't see them in person, how do you hold on and maintain those relationships? So I think we were all challenged to kind of maintain relationships in a different way.
Out basically.
And I think that, then you had some people who, had to completely lock down. So even when we were allowed to start meeting people in person, there were still people in full lockdown who couldn't do that either. And I think that's challenged some relationships. It's not fair. It's not fair that you're doing that and I can't do this. You think, because of the way that some of the guidelines have been, you've got teachers or people going into work but who can't go and see their parents, and you think how some of it just doesn't make sense. It's like the pubs being open before the before the gyms being open. You know, for some people that wasn't fair. It doesn't make sense. So I think if you've got people with strong opinions who can't have something that somebody else has got, I think that's probably challenged some relationships.
Yeah.
Well, let alone the tension of, you know, lockdown and being in the same house, especially when you've got people who are working from home. You know, you haven't got people going, you know, you haven't got that space where you go out to work.
Yeah.
Then you get to put that different hat on and be somebody else or in a different role. If you're both working from home, living from home, you can't have any activities to talk about like
or
that.
Or anything,
yeah. And I spoke to.
It became very popular for everybody.
Yeah, but I spoke to somebody who, who had made a decision in work, and the person in work said to them, I don't want to do that. I go home to an empty house. I don't want to work on my own because I go home to an empty house. I'm isolated when I go home. So my work is giving me that human contact, which is really important. So, you know, the whole introvert extrovert has definitely, I think a lot of people have really had to think about, okay, I thought I was an extrovert because I like going out and I like people, but actually this being at home and not seeing people for a bit is actually working quite well for me. That re-energizing, you know, and the whole Zoom calls, and that's quite intrusive. So I think there's been lots of challenges. But to go into the last month talking about communication, I think people who have communicated their frustrations and communicated what they want instead have come through this pretty well, because they've been able to work out what the problem is, work out what they think the solution is, and have those conversations with people. But not everybody's been able to do that. Some people that, you know, that is a real challenge for them to do that and be able to have those conversations, and I think that makes it tough for people to be able to work it out.
It's applying the same rule for everybody who has got such different circumstances. It's quite mental, isn't it? It's quite crazy.
I think even, you know, just I'm just thinking, you know, parents that have had to homeschool, they've suddenly become they haven't just had the parent-child relationship, they've now had to be a teacher-child relationship. How do you switch that? You know, I think that's where some people have had very clear divisions between this time and this time we're schooling, and this time and this time it's home. But how do, you know, for younger children, how do you work that out of, you know, then a teacher relationship, a teaching relationship is very different from a parenting relationship, and I think that's confusing for people as well. So
definitely. And some people have had to homeschool and work full time. I know people who are having the kids all day and then having to spend the evenings working because they're not able to get the work done in the day. So their life is really changed, like to another level. It's you know, and I think lockdown has been great for many people, but it's not been great for a lot of people. And I think for parents it's been a struggle. It's just, isn't it? It's just been crazy.
If you're working and you've got children of a school age, I think you are definitely, it's definitely been a challenge. And just, I think even just helping them to understand what's going on. I don't think there's been anybody who hasn't been impacted. I think everybody's been impacted in very different ways, and what's been quite manageable for some has been really difficult for others. And I think that's where, you know, the whole be kind and let's not judge and let's not be judgmental about how we comment on what decisions some people are making, because we don't know the full picture of what's going on behind the scenes, or how they come to that.
Anyway, you never do you?
No. That's very true.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. Question 3. Okay, what would you say to a 20-year-old Zoe about relationships with other people and, more importantly, yourself?
Would there be any point? Because I'm not sure I'd listen.
We've course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. None of us would.
Old Zoe thought she knew it all, thought she'd got it all sussed out. What would I say? Oh, that's such a difficult one. I think I don't know how much of me has changed since my 20-year-old. I think I am definitely probably eyes more wide open. But I do think that there's certain things about how I approach and how I see people has probably not changed that much. And that coming into meeting new people, it's always that people are there with the best intentions, and see people as I find them and work it out in my own time. I don't know. That's a tough. It's a tough question. The thing is because at 20, I had already been working for the police for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think if you'd said 18, my answer probably would be a little bit different. But I think that difference between 18 and finishing A levels and 20 after those first 2 years of working for the police, and I think especially because I was sort of frontline dealing with the public, and so I probably in that first 2 years the learning curve was like that, because I was exposed to this world that I knew existed, but I didn't know existed like here in Bristol. It existed in films and things like that. It didn't exist on the doorstep. And so I that first 2 years I met this real variety of people in every given situation, and I think that probably opened my eyes a huge amount into how people live and how what's the just the variety of what's important to different people. So I think at 20 my answer would be, the answer for 20 would probably be different for 18.
That's why I wanted to say 20 though, because you've had some experience at life but not massive experience. You're not still a teenager, but you have had a little bit, and I just wanted to get sort of your take on the difference between that period when you've had a little bit of experience at life, or for you quite a lot because of the job that you were doing, and now there's just that was just
And then so I think the other thing is that at 20 that was when I met my son's dad, and I had my son, well, I was 21, so I was 22 the morning after. So again, that kind of period of my life was again just meeting this in that circumstance a very different culture. So I'd gone from meeting a very different society in the 2 years of work to then meeting a very different culture when I met my son's dad, and meeting some really amazing people in that space of time as well, of learning and understanding how people lived in a different part of the world and what was important to them and how their relationships worked, because it's so different, as so different to here. Lots of generations living in one house and how they set up their world to care for each other, very different to here. So I think again it's like the 18 to 20 learn so much about the kind of locally society and how that all fits together, and then sort of that 20 to 22 was another 2 years of seeing things work in a very, very different way, and I think working it all out for myself as well. I think I probably didn't have the life experience and the maturity that I thought I had at that age, if I'm being honest, looking back. But it is what it is, isn't it? It's you. I think that probably hasn't changed for me, is that I still very much live for the moment, and you meet people, and actually, so Terry, who's put some comments on, I remember a conversation with Terry some time ago where we talked about the whole people for a season, reason, or lifetime, and conversations where some people are stepping stones to get you, to help support and guide you to get you to that next step, help shape and evolve you, that takes you on to something else. And I do see that, I still see that very much now. I think the relationships that we have with people are, there's always a reason for them. You know, there's the reason that, you know, they give us something or they help us to get somewhere. And so I think, you know, I think you could probably go back and go through lots of people who you've met over the years, and there's always something that they've contributed to your life, isn't it? It's like that sliding doors. If you hadn't met that person, would things be very different, you know?
How would it have led on? Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And definitely, you know, I
like your first answer though, which is, would it matter because you wouldn't have listened? Because I actually don't think it does matter, because you know, you are exactly where you're meant to be. And it doesn't matter
I don't know, and I've been asked this before, but I don't know. Even if you gave me a time traveling machine and said, here you go, roll on back to that period of time and go and make some different decisions, I don't know that I would. Because if I hadn't have had those experiences, if I hadn't been on that journey, would I end up where I am now doing what I do now?
Probably not.
So I don't know that I would. I think there's probably little things that I might have handled a little bit differently, you know, because you learn life skills along the way, don't you? That you think,
of course,
I might have dealt with that a little bit differently. But I think actually those big decisions, I don't think I would.
No, I think you're exactly where you're meant to be. We all are. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So my next question is, how do you think social media impacts our relationships with other people? So the world is like so much smaller now. It's so much more accessible. People are so much more accessible. Can we form authentic relationships in this digital age?
Yes, I think so. I think it's a way of connecting. I think social media, the online world, is a great way of connecting with people who you wouldn't necessarily meet passing in the street. But I think, again, this probably links back to that first question. When you're clear who you are and what you're about and what's important to you and what you want from your life and where you're heading, when you're clear on what you want, it makes it very easy to find people with similar interests or similar goals or a similar perspective. And I think that can be great. I've met some very genuine friends that I've been with for a very, very long time through the internet. You know, I've met people. I'm going to a wedding at the end of the year. Again, people that I met through the fitness world online. You know, I've met people. Terry's one of them. You know, we met through Facebook 12 years ago now. You know, and it's a very authentic friendship, you know, and I think there's lots of people where you've got similar interests that it gives you an opportunity to meet, and those relationships can grow. I think they're also very easy to kind of pass and not develop, but I think if there's a genuine connection with similar interests, then that friendship holds through time. If you've got similar values or you've got a similar outlook. But I think also what the internet is great at doing is it puts you in front of and connects you with people who are very different and who do have a very different perspective and who do see the world differently. And that's, you know, I think whilst that's one thing that really frustrates some people about it, that's one thing that I really value from it, in seeing other people's points of view, seeing other people's, you know, talking about their experiences, because, you know, the world is a small place. Social media has either made it smaller in terms of our ability to connect, but actually in terms of being able to see what's going on in the world and see the experiences of other people,
so much more
know about. And I think that's the thing, is I think it's very, you know, dependent on where you live. You know, we're very fortunate that Bristol's a very diverse city, but even within Bristol, you can live in pockets of Bristol and not live and connect with people from different worlds to your own, or people who have different experiences. So there's that. I think it does help with that. I think it helps us to see what else is going on. I think that can also be be a negative. With anything, and in particular with social media, if it's in balance, it can be a real positive.
Yeah.
If it's out of balance, I think we can have too much of it, and we can overdo it. And I think if you're still working out who you are, it can, we look at grooming and how some young people can be very influenced. Then again, that into the insecurity and working out who you are, it's not a safe space for people. So I think there are masses of benefits if you use it in a way that works for you, and don't get caught up in that mindless, making very conscious decisions about who you follow and who you're connected with and who you let into your headspace. That it seems like a very straight question, but why am I following this person? Why am I connected with this person? What value do they add to my world? What value do I add to their world? And why am I connected with them? And I think people need to realize that if you delete somebody off social media, they don't disappear off planet Earth.
Exactly.
A disconnect tool of, that connection is no longer there. And so I think just people need to be very conscious about what connections and what relationships they're building online, and how that contributes in a positive way to their world.
Do you think that we get to see the real person on social media? Because some people get a bit brave with what they post or say, and some opinions that they might not have if they were in the same room as somebody. And what do you think? Does that mean that's the real them and that's their opinion, or are they just jumping on the bandwagon, or are they just feeling like gobbing off a bit? I don't know.
I think it very much depends on the individual, doesn't it? I think some people fulfill a need through social media and through an online presence, but they're not fulfilling it in a healthy way. I think it's that need for attention, or the need for support, or the need for that connection. So if you think about the human needs, that need for connection, the need for love, the need for significance. There's a lot of people trying to meet those needs through social media, when there's actually there are healthy ways to meet those needs through social media, but not necessarily that's their approach. I think in terms of people giving their opinions on social media, it almost feels like a safe space, doesn't it, to be very vocal about what you think. I think people should be able to express what their thoughts are, because we have a world of free speech, but I think we can still do that in a respectful way, and we can still do that in a way that doesn't put people down and isn't derogatory to people. But I think people online, again, we need to do a bit of research, I think, before we comment. I think we need to be able to stand behind our comments and know that we can be our own critical thinker. We've asked a few questions before. I think there's a whole lot of copy paste and sharing that goes on, so checking and validation before that's done. And there's a lot of people that take advantage of that, isn't there, of being able to get information out of people. But I think the whole trolling and kind of being very vocal, it does make you wonder, doesn't it, of actually, if we were sat in around the table right now, would you be expressing these opinions quite so freely, or are you doing this because you're in the safety of your own home and you don't have to defend your opinions quite so much? But I think free speech is good, but I think free speech still needs to come with respect and with some courtesy to the people who you're having the conversation with. And actually, free speech it's about expressing your own opinions. It's not about trying to change somebody else's opinion. And I think that's where people get, for me, that's where the line gets crossed, that actually you hold your opinion, you have your beliefs, you have every right to believe what you believe is true. It would probably be helpful to most of us to question what we believe is true, probably a little bit more frequently. But actually, freedom of speech is not about telling other people that they're wrong, or that your belief is better or more valuable or more important than somebody else's belief or their experiences. And I think that's where the line gets a little bit blurry for people.
I think you're right.
Forcing their own beliefs onto somebody else, and
yes,
it gets a little bit icky, because we all feel quite strongly that what we believe is true.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to persuade somebody that your belief is more important or more correct or more right than somebody else's.
Do you think that if you post something out there that someone doesn't agree with, they have the right to challenge you because it's out there on social media?
Oh, I think if I disagree with something, I think there's probably two questions that I ask myself. Is actually, how important is it to me that I disagree with this? Like, do I disagree so strongly that I'm prepared to get into a conversation with it? Is it and is it worth? Does it value my, to give my energy to this? Like, because sometimes, it's just easier to just keep scrolling. Some people have just got a little bit more time to get into it, but actually, if you feel really strongly about it and you are prepared to have a conversation, that's very different to challenge or to put your opinion across. But I think it does, again, you need to be prepared to have a conversation about it, not just drop in comment and then do a runner. I think again, it's having that respect, isn't it? That if you were having a conversation around the table and somebody said something to you that you disagreed with, would you speak up in that conversation and be prepared to have a conversation around it?
Actually talk about it.
If you're gonna just keep drinking your coffee and say nothing, then you keep scrolling and you say nothing, because actually these conversations are a lot harder to have online than they are to have in person. So that would be my rule of thumb. I guess if you've put it in public, then you are opening yourselves up. You've put your opinion out there, so actually you are inviting other people to give.
I think so too. Okay, so final question.
Really?
Okay, which 3 people would you say are the most influential in the world right now? So whose work are you really loving and think that they're making a positive change towards a better world, especially with what's going on in the world right now? You might struggle to pinpoint 1, let alone 3, but
with these questions, I always find it hard to bring somebody up to mind. I think there's also so much going on, isn't there? I think that's such a good question. Can I ask you yours? If you had someone in mind, can I be cheeky and throw the question back to you just to see if I can bounce off of where your head's at with it when you wrote the question?
Well, I mean, for me, I think Michelle Obama's always been doing amazing work, but I think now that she's out of the White House, she's able to do she has the freedom to do so much more and showcase what she was doing as well. It's not new that she's doing amazing things. It's just now she's able to be more free, and I think what she does in terms of education and for women as well it's just brilliant. I just really love everything she does.
I thought the Netflix documentary was really powerful, and just seeing
her book's amazing as well. And
I've not read the book, but I have got the podcast. Not the podcast. I have got the Audible book.
And she's got a podcast out now as well.
Yeah.
I think she just discusses some really. She talks about real issues that need addressing. That's just one person. I mean, I can think of loads of people, but that's just sort of one person that I think is doing really important work.
I think that's I always, because it's always very easy, isn't it, to pick on pick on the celebrities or the famous people, because they're very visible, aren't they, on the work that they're doing. But I think, just in light of everything that's been going on over the last couple of months, I think there have been some very sort of day-to-day human kind of people
absolutely.
going home and being mums and dads who have been really key in the work that they've been doing, and over the last couple of months. And I think there's key people in Bristol who are doing work with making sure that children that would normally have been fed in schools have still been fed. There's people who have sorted out homes for homeless people. There's people that have looked after the street workers, that have made sure that they've had safe accommodation and kept them safe. So I think people who've looked after the people who don't have somebody looking out for them. And I think there are these people just show up day in, day out, don't they? And I think that they just never ceases to amaze me, because they don't have the funds, they don't have this money and influence and power that some of the, when you look at celebrities, and I don't want to put Michelle Obama in that celebrity category, but in terms of
it just doesn't seem right, does it?
And she's got the power, she's got the influence. She's got a lot of things that really enable her to do what she wants to do, and I absolutely commend that. And she's definitely up there. If I could grab a coffee with anyone, she is definitely up there. But I think there's, when you take away the power, the influence, and the money, there are people that that in this world that fight that day in.
They have human spirit,
to make their communities better and to make people's lives better without any of that. So I think there's probably they're people that are coming to mind for me. I mean, I think it's when you've got a platform, you have a responsibility, and I think these conversations. So Dana Dozy, who's the captain for Flyers, is doing this with me next week. And we've had conversations before of when you get given that that badge, or you get given that responsibility, that there's certain things that you can then go and influence. There's certain things that you can then go and do because you're in that role. So I think the people that spring to mind, even if I mentioned the names, anybody watching probably aren't going to recognize, they won't recognize them. But if I talk about the roles that they do, know that those people are out there. And I think there were a lot of people that really stepped up and went the extra mile when lockdown happened, of thinking about the people who we don't think about.
And I think that's important, and it is important to highlight that as well, that there are people all over the city, all over the world, everywhere, that do that work without the spotlight, without having a PR agent, or having a podcast, or they just get up in the morning and they do what they do, and they just make the world a better place just by doing these little things that they're doing. And a lot of them do go unrecognized, and I think we should talk more about those people and those things that are being done in our city, especially, that make a difference, because without those things, we wouldn't be where we are.
And I think that I think there's a lot of people that make Bristol the great city that it is. And I think it's very easy, isn't it, to always look for the negatives, because there's especially with social media and with the news, we see the negatives all the time. But you look at people going out delivering food to people. There's a cafe that's open down the road from us, which is pay what you can afford. So they're taking food donations, and you can go down, and if you can pay a £5 for your meal, you pay a £5, and if you can't afford to pay for your meal, you don't pay. And there's that general acceptance that people will do the right thing, and that they will be able to keep that going, and they will be able to feed people who might not have the money to get that food. And I think every time anything happens, there's always people who step up And it's not just doing the right thing, is it? But they go that extra step to do the right thing for other people as well. And I think that's, every city has those people, but I think, you know, I think we do go some way to recognizing those people. But, you know, you're right, we could mention their names, and most people watching or tuning into this are not necessarily going to know who, they're not going to know necessarily who they are. So
yeah. Okay, well, that's my 5 questions. I can't believe it. I've got so many more.
So Terry's been typing away in the comments. Sorry, Terry, we haven't been ignoring you. It's very going cross-eyed. I think we have mentioned you, maybe not for the question. I think Terry wanted to be named as one of the top influential people. But yeah, I think they were a really, really good question. So, and no, I really appreciate it, because I know I did chuck at least one of them back at you to find out what your answer was. I think sometimes for me it's easier to understand where you're coming from with the question.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more of high level world sort of thing, but you know, I think you going back to that sort of close by people that are actually making a difference is brilliant. They need
there are lots of people out there, aren't there, that are using their platform for really good stuff. I think it probably also depends on what's important to you as to who you spot that's doing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, like we said earlier about
on what's important to you. Yeah, then you would make those connections with what other people are doing. So great question. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for letting me ask you some questions without knowing anything about what I was going to ask.
No, I didn't, because I wasn't sure whether it would be one question on relationships or all 5. So Terry's also saying thank you. There were quite a few people tuned in at one point. It's always, again, very difficult to know, but I will put this up on Instagram TV and YouTube and share across the channels. But thank you so much for your time and amazing questions. And I will speak to you soon.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.